present structure of the mosque, which stands over the cave of Machpelah, is mainly Crusader. In the mosque there are 6 cenotaphs, which are said to stand directly above the graves of the patriarchs and their wives buried in the cave. The Muslims never descended into the cave, which is considered to be too sacred to walk in. The cenotaphs of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are covered with green and gold cloths, and those of Sarah, Rebecca, and Leah with crimson cloths.
This slide shows the tombs of Isaac and Rebecca, which are located in the middle of the mosque, and the mihrab, which is the niche towards which the Muslims turn in prayer. The pulpit to the right is a fine cedar wood carving and is believed to have been installed by Saladin in the 12th century.
Hebron is famous for its industry of pottery and hand-blown glass, known as Hebron glass. Pottery and glass are made in the same way as in the very remote times. I went down to the potter's house, and there he was working at his wheel. The potter makes the required shape by skillfully touching the moist clay spinning round on the wheel.
Apart from its pottery, Hebron has also been famous for many centuries for its industry of glass blown as in ancient times. A long rod is thrust into the molten glass in the furnace, and with swift movements, and then by blowing gently, as seen in this slide, all kinds of bottles, vases, cups, and beads of different colors are made.
About 2.5 miles from the western shore of the Dead Sea, in the wilderness of Judea, stands the rock fortress of Masada. Masada has become a shrine for the Jews, since it has been the site of one of the most dramatic episodes of Jewish history. It is the symbol of courage and heroism, the symbol of choice of death over slavery. In 40 BC, Herod the Great built a huge, magnificent fortress at the top of Masada. After the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, a band of Jewish patriots, led by Eliezer ben Yair, marched on Masada and captured it from a Roman garrison. Joined later by a few surviving patriots who evaded capture in Jerusalem, they determined to continue the fight for freedom and made Masada a base for guerrilla strikes against the Romans. In 72 AD, Silva, a general of Titus, marched on that great rock of Masada, and after a long besiege of many months and hard fighting, a break was made in the wall. The leader, Ben Yair, knowing that it was the beginning of the end, gathered his men and delivered one of the most dramatic speeches in history, urging them to die by their own hands rather than fall into the hands of their enemies. They then chose 10 men by lot to slay all the rest. The Romans entered the fortress, saw the bodies, and heard the story from the 2 women who with 5 small children had hidden themselves. Far from exulting in the triumph of joy that might have been expected from enemies, they united to admire the steady virtue and dignity of mind with which the Jews had been inspired, and wondered at the contempt of death by which such numbers had been bound in one solemn compact. For the Romans, it was a hollow victory.
General Silva, resolving to crush this outpost of resistance, marched on Masada with his best soldiers, the 10th Legion, and prepared himself for a long siege. He built a wall 3 miles in circumference all round the fortress. At strategic points around the base, he established 8 military camps. The blockade was complete, none of the besieged could escape, and they cut off the rest of the infantry. This slide shows the rock of Masada with the remains of the Roman camps which had been established all around its base.
The top of Masada, 1/2 mile long, 220 yards wide, was excavated in 1963 to 1965 by Professor Yigal Yadin and volunteers from many different countries. These storehouses, shown in this slide, are part of many important and interesting remains discovered in the fortress, which was strongly fortified and very expensively built. The Rock of Masada, standing majestically in the desert, is still a glorious witness to the courage and dignity of those who preferred to die free rather than to live in slavery. It is one of the most interesting and emotional sights to be seen in Israel.
Bethany is 2 miles east of Jerusalem on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives. Since the 4th century, it carries the name of Lazarus, El Azariah, since it was the home of Lazarus and his 2 sisters, Mary and Martha, whom Jesus loved. And Jesus often visited Bethany. Here he taught the better way of life, when he said to Martha, "Martha, Martha, you're anxious about too many things. Only one is necessary. Mary has chosen the better part, which shall not be taken from her." Here Christ performed the great miracle of raising Lazarus from the dead. Here in the house of Simon the leper, Mary anointed Jesus with very precious perfume.
It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. It seems that the tomb of Lazarus was hewn in the rock within a cave. No wonder Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." 22 steps lead down to a dark cave which is the traditional tomb of Lazarus. The original entrance, which must have been at ground level, was sealed by the Muslims, who built a mosque between the church and the tomb.
Jericho lies 820 feet below sea level in the Jordan Valley, which is a great rift in the earth's crust, extending from Mount Hermon in the north to the Gulf of Aqaba in the south, a distance of 280 miles. Since very remote times, Jericho has been well known for the richness of its well-watered soil and its oranges, bananas, and dates. It was called the City of Palms. While in summertime, Jericho is very hot and airless, in winter and spring, it has a wonderful climate, and the air is pervaded with the odors of many different kinds of flowers. Jericho, with its rich soil, has been the cradle of human civilization as far back as 7,000 to 10,000 BC. It is considered the oldest city in the world to have been discovered so far.
Dr. Sellon was the first to start digging the site of Old Jericho in 1908. In 1926 to 36, Garstang of the British School of Archaeology excavated for 6 campaigns, continuing the work begun by Dr. Sellon. This was continued by Miss Kathleen Kenyon in 1952. The result of the final excavations was the discovery of the earliest stratified levels ever found in any part of the world. Objects found were examined by the carbon-14 method and dated to 7000 BC. On the bedrock, a very interesting Neolithic tower was discovered. It is built of stones and mud with a pierced center from top to bottom, in which are 22 well-built steps.
The temptation of Jesus was immediately after his baptism in the Jordan River. And Jesus, being full of the Holy Ghost, returned from Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. Neither the Gospel nor any other source enable us to determine exactly the spot where Jesus underwent his 40 days of fasting. Later tradition indicated the Mount of Karantal, which rises up behind the old Jericho as the site of the first and third temptations. The summit of the mountain, which commands a magnificent view of the Jordan Valley and the land of Moab, is indicated as the site of the last temptation, where the devil showed him all the kingdoms of the world.
The River Jordan is a strange stream which flows down from the perpetual snow-capped heights of Mount Hermon to the depths of the Dead Sea. It twists and curves in a 160-mile-long bend, while the distance it covers is only 65 miles in a straight line. Its average width is 100 feet. The Jordan is a holy river. John, an austere-looking figure clothed with camel's hair, eating locusts and honey, was preaching and baptizing along the lower reaches of the Jordan. Jesus came from Galilee and was baptized in the River Jordan by St. John.
And when Jesus was baptized, he went up immediately from the water. And behold, the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove, and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven saying, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased."
The traditional spot where Jesus was baptized is located 5 miles east of Jericho. Somewhere near the site of the baptism, the Israelites under Joshua crossed the river and invaded the land.
The Dead Sea is 47 miles long by 10 miles wide. It has a surface area of 360 square miles, and its water attains a maximum depth of 1,278 feet. It lies 1,290 feet below sea level, which is the lowest spot on the Earth's surface. It is called the Dead Sea because of the absence of any animal life in its water, which is the most salt-saturated water in the world, containing about 27% solids. The reason why the Dead Sea is a huge concentration of chemicals is because it has no outlet. Every day, the Jordan and other streams pour out nearly 7 million tons of water mixed with sulfurous and nitrous matter. This water, unable to escape and subject to the tremendous heat of the Jordan Valley, evaporates, leaving behind a large deposit of solid and other chemicals in the sea.
Qumran, lying at the northwest shore of the Dead Sea, was the home of the community of the Essenes, the writers of the famous Dead Sea Scrolls. The site was found and completely excavated in 1951 to 56. The ruins comprised a main building, 120 feet long by 90 feet wide, and was constructed with large stones, roughly dressed and coated with plaster. On the north side stands a defensive tower. A dining room with an adjoining kitchen containing over 1,000 ceramic bowls was found. The compound around the main building comprised a dyer shop, stable, pottery, workshop, a mill, and 7 cisterns. The most interesting find was the scriptorium with the benches, the writing table, and 2 inkstands, with one containing dried ink.
This cave is about 100 yards from the ruins of Qumran, and it is the only cave which can be easily visited, since the other caves are in the rock face of the mountain and are not easy to reach. Cave number 4, discovered in 1952 by the Bedouins, produced the largest quantity of manuscript material. Most manuscripts were hidden in this cave, as it was the nearest to the settlement.
Seven cisterns were found in Qumran. These cisterns were filled with rainwater, channeled from the nearby cliffs by an aqueduct, the remains of which may be seen to the west. This slide shows a cistern dated to the 8th century BC. The crack in the steps is probably the result of a devastating earthquake in 31 BC, after which the settlement was destroyed and abandoned.
In 1949, Professor Harding, Director of Antiquities in Jordan, Père de Vaux, Director of the École Biblique in Jerusalem, with the Bedouins, encouraged by the financial rewards of the scroll business, started researches all over the western region of the Dead Sea. More than 30 caves have been excavated and thousands of fragments were found. The Dead Sea Scrolls were written in ancient Hebrew on leather and papyrus, with the exception of 2 scrolls which were written on copper.
Jacob, on his return from Mesopotamia, came to the beautiful valley lying between the 2 mountains, Gerizim and Ebal, as did Abraham before him. He bought a piece of land on which he pitched his tent, and dug a well for himself, his children, and his flocks. Since that time, the well has been known as Jacob's Well. It was at this same well that Christ met the Samaritan woman and asked her for water to drink. If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, "Give me a drink," you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. St. John mentioned that this sublime dialogue took place at Jacob's well, by Jacob, and at which Christ talked to the Samaritan woman. The well is 7.5 feet in diameter, 90 feet deep, and contains soft water.
Numbering 400 people, 240 in Nablus and 160 in Holon, the Samaritans are the strangest and most ancient sect in the world. Remnants of a once powerful race, the Samaritans have remained pure in blood for 2,500 years. The separation between the Samaritans and the Jews began after the return from the Babylonian captivity. The Jews refused to consider the inhabitants of Samaria, who escaped deportation, as Jews because they had mingled with the colonist Assyrians. They also refused to allow them to share in the rebuilding of the temple. The Samaritans, with implacable hatred, separated themselves from the Jews and built a rival temple on Mount Gerizim. From the Bible, they only recognized the 5 books of Moses, and their most precious possession is an ancient copy of the Pentateuch written on parchment. They claim that their Pentateuch is the oldest handwritten book in the world, and that it was written by Aaron, Moses' brother, 3,600 years ago. Scholars date their book to the 12th century A.D. Many of the Samaritans are poor, and some are mentally sick, as they only marry within their own group.
The valley of Jezreel stretches between the mountains of Galilee in the north and the mountains of Samaria in the south. It is the largest valley in Israel. It has the shape of a triangle, 15 by 15 by 20 miles. It was famous in ancient times as it is today for its fertility. It is known as the breadbasket of Israel. The strategic position and the fertility of this plain made it one of the most famous battlefields of the ancient world. More than 20 battles have been fought for its control. Hebrews, Canaanites, Midianites, Syrians, Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Crusaders, Turks, and last the British under Allenby during the First World War fought on its soil.
Armageddon, located on the southern edge of the plain of Jezreel, was a strategic center in biblical and earlier ages. Its position, commanding the great highway which connected the land of Egypt and the south, with Mesopotamia and Syria in the north, was of great strategic value throughout history. The numerous battles fought at Megiddo made it a symbol of war. Christian belief envisions that the last and final great battle of the world shall be fought at Megiddo. And he gathered them together in a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. Megiddo was excavated between 1926 and 1936 by the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago. Excavations covering an area of 13 acres revealed the remains of 20 superimposed cities. Each city was represented by a distinct layer of ruins. The earliest dated to about 4000 BC, and the latest, built on 70 feet of high rubble, to about 400 BC.
The most amazing and interesting find in Megiddo was the discovery of an ingenious water system, which is one of the most remarkable examples of the skilled engineering of ancient times. A large shaft was sunk to the ground. From the bottom of the shaft, a tunnel was cut through the rocks, channeling the water into the city from a spring outside the city. The spring opening was covered with earth to hide it from the besieging forces. The tunnel is still well preserved after 3,000 years. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph. And the virgin's name was Mary. And he came to her and said, "Hail, O favored one, the Lord is with you. For you have found favor with God, and behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus."
Nazareth, enshrined amidst hills, is one of the main Christian cities. It was the place chosen by God for the annunciation of the birth of his Son. Here the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Here Jesus grew to manhood. Here he spent his hidden 30 years playing in the streets and on the hills, with nothing to distinguish him from the other children. When Jesus began his ministry, he was not understood in Nazareth. Amen, I say to you, but no prophet is accepted in his own country. The first attempt on Jesus' life was made in Nazareth. Jesus then left Nazareth, went down to Capernaum, and made it his city.
This large, magnificent church, built in 1960 to 1968 over the Grotto of the Annunciation, is one of the largest Christian sanctuaries in the Middle East. It was designed by the Italian architect Signor Muzio, who achieved a great architectural success. He built 2 interconnected churches, one above the other, preserving in full the remains of ancient churches. The 2 churches are 80 feet high and 130 feet long. The western and southern facades are decorated with statues illustrating the Incarnation and the Annunciation.
Mary's Well is one of the authentic sites of the Holy Land. It was and still is the city's only water supply. There is no doubt that Jesus with his mother came here to draw water, as come today the women and children of Nazareth. The stream gushes out of the mountain and runs through a conduit to a public fountain. The Greek Orthodox claim that the Annunciation took place while the Virgin Mary was drawing water from the fountain, and they built their church over it.
There are 3 or 4 places of that name which claim to be Cana of the New Testament. Cana, which lies 4 miles along the road from Nazareth to Tiberias, is the most favored one. Cana is known throughout the whole Christian world, as it was the scene of the first miracle of Jesus, when he changed water into wine at the wedding feast. The 2 small churches, one belonging to the Greek Orthodox and the second to the Franciscan Fathers, are built on the traditional site of the wedding ceremony to commemorate the first miracle of Jesus.
Tiberias lies 682 feet below sea level on the west side of the Sea of Galilee. In 62 AD, Herod Antipas built this city with beautiful palaces, theaters, temples, shining with gold and marble, public baths over the hot springs famed throughout the Roman world for their healing properties, and named it Tiberias, in honor of the Roman Emperor Tiberius. After the Bar Kokhba revolt and the expulsion of the Jews from Jerusalem, Tiberius replaced Jerusalem and became the dwelling place of the great sages and the religious and intellectual Jewish center. Many famous rabbis are buried in Tiberias, which is considered as one of the 4 sacred Jewish cities. It is the most popular winter resort in Israel.
The Sea of Galilee is 13 miles long, 7 miles wide, between 130 and 157 feet deep, and lies at 686 feet below sea level. The water is pure and is generally calm, but sometimes sudden and dangerous storms turning into a raging sea with high waves. At the time of Jesus, Galilee was the main artery of roads crossing in all directions. The good communications, the extreme fertility of the valley, the beauty of the landscape drew a considerable population. The Sea of Galilee, as a central feature, was surrounded by 9 seas, each of not less than 15,000 inhabitants. It was on the slopes of this beautiful lake, described as the ambition of nature, that Jesus began to preach the kingdom of God. Here, Jesus passed most of his public life, gave most of his teachings, and worked most of his miracles. On the seashore, Jesus called Peter, Andrew, James, and other apostles. Here, Jesus healed a leper. Here, Jesus spoke to the multitude from Peter's boat. Here, Jesus commanded the violent storm to be still. Jesus walked on the stormy water. The 12 apostles were ordained on a mountain near the sea.
At present, the calm blue surface of the water is disturbed by sailing boats. At the time of Jesus, the Sea of Galilee and the valleys surrounding it were a scene of continuous activity. George Adams Smith describes the sea and its surroundings. Where there are now no trees, there were great woods. Where there are marshes, there were noble gardens. Where there is but one boat, there were fleets of sails.
The Sea of Galilee and the plain of the Gennesaret around its shores offer one of the most beautiful landscapes in Israel. At the time of Jesus, Josephus described this landscape as the ambition of nature. Father Eugene Hode describes the lake. I believe that there are more beautiful lakes in the world set in a more enchanting surrounding, but I still believe that there is not in the world a more fascinating lake. Look at its azure blue in deep sleep without a ripple on its bosom. The little sailing boats, as if just painted on the canvas. Not a breath of air to disturb in its waters the great reflections of the surrounding mountains. It is a joy that leads one to hourless contemplation.
Capernaum is located 2.5 miles from where the Jordan enters the Sea of Galilee. At the time of Jesus, it was probably the largest and richest city along the shores of the sea, with a customs station and a residence for a high Roman officer. Jesus left Nazareth, went down to Capernaum, and made it the center of his activities for about 20 months. Here he manifested his goodness and his omnipotence by most of his miracles. Capernaum was the home of St. Peter. Here Jesus taught in the synagogue. Here Jesus healed a leper, delivered a man of an unclean spirit, healed Peter's mother-in-law and the centurion's servant. Jesus healed the palsied man when he was let down through the roof. Jesus raised Jairus' daughter from the dead. Jesus healed the woman who had an issue of blood. Jesus healed 2 blind men. Jesus healed the withered hand. Jesus pronounced a curse upon the city. And though thou, Capernaum, which art exalted unto heaven, shall be brought down to hell, for if the mighty works which have been done in thee had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. But I say to you that it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom in the day of judgment than for thee.
Among the Jewish symbols are the menorah, the shofar, the ram's horn, the Star of David, the palm tree, which is the old symbol of the land, and the Ark of the Covenant, seen in this slide. Christians venerate the site as some of these still standing stones once echoed with the voice of Jesus, worshipping, teaching, and making miracles in the first synagogue.
This modern little chapel of primacy was built in 1934 over a massive rock known since the medieval ages as Mensa Christi, the Table of the Lord. It is the traditional site where the risen Lord appeared to his disciples, prepared breakfast for them, and gave Peter the pastoral commission of "Feed my sheep."
The word Tapka derives from the Greek word heptapagon, meaning 7 springs. It is a place with a plentiful supply of water. The tradition localizes here the site where Jesus fed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And they all ate and were satisfied, and they took up 12 baskets full of pieces and of the fish. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. 2 Byzantine churches were built on this site, made holy by the miracle of Jesus. In 1932, remains of these 2 churches were discovered with the most striking and best preserved mosaics. The floor is a magnificent mosaic picture of birds, fishes, beasts, and flowers of the lake region. Beneath the altar, there is a mosaic of a basket of loaves flanked by fish, as seen in this slide.
The Mount of Beatitudes is the site where Jesus uttered the immortal words of the Beatitudes and the most wonderful principles of the blessed life. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are the weak, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
This church, commanding a superb view of the lake, was built in 1937 by the Franciscans.
Magdala is located 4 miles north of Tiberias. Today it is a small village of fishermen. At the time of Christ, it was a city of considerable importance. According to Josephus, it had 4,000 inhabitants and a fleet of 230 boats. Magdala became famous because it is the birthplace of Mary Magdalene, the woman Jesus healed from evil spirits and infirmities. Mary Magdalene then became one of the most devoted and faithful followers of Christ. She followed him to his death on Calvary. She was the first to come to the tomb on the day of his resurrection and the first to see the risen Lord.
Mount Tabor, in apparent isolation without foothills, rises abruptly 1,600 feet above the surrounding plains and 1,900 feet above sea level. It is the most picturesque and striking mountain in the Galilee. To the psalmist, its strength and beauty are a testimony to the Creator. In Psalm 89, David sings that Tabor and Hermon shall rejoice in the name of the Lord. Its beauty was mentioned many times in the Bible. It was considered as a holy mountain for Israel, as it was a witness to the glory of God, manifested in the important victory of Barak, advised and led by the prophetess Deborah, over the strong Canaanite army of Sisera. For the Christians, Mount Tabor is a holy mount, as it was chosen by Jesus to be the place of his transfiguration.
A cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. And a voice came out of the cloud saying, "This is my Son, my chosen. Listen to him." Mount Tabor, Gate of the Wind. This gate, known as the Gate of the Wind, is part of a fortress wall built by the Muslims in the 13th century around the top of Mount Tabor. Since ancient times, Mount Tabor has been used as a fortified stronghold of great importance, and on its top, which is 1,300 yards long and 450 yards wide, there are still many ruins of ancient fortresses and monasteries.
Acre, commanding the approach to the rich plain of Jezreel from the sea, is one of the oldest cities in the world. During its history, it has been occupied by different people. The great history of Acre began with the Crusaders. In 1104, Baldwin I conquered the city, fortified it to secure the seaports, and made it one of the main bulwarks of the Latin kingdom. The Crusaders, unable to reconquer Jerusalem, made Acre the capital of their kingdom. In 1291, Sultan Malik al-Ashraf besieged Acre with 200,000 soldiers, captured it, and put an end to the Latin kingdom, which had lasted for 200 years, 1099 to 1291. In 1775, Acre was rebuilt by Ahmed al-Jazar, nicknamed the Butcher on account of his cruelty. In 1799, Napoleon besieged the city, failed to conquer it, and retreated to Egypt with the greatest setback of his Oriental campaign and the end of his dreams of an Eastern empire. During the Turkish rule, Acre gradually declined, and it was at last overshadowed by its neighboring city of Haifa.
Crusader and Turkish ruins are the only remains of the long, stirring history of Acre, which has had 17 recorded sieges. The most important remains of the Crusader period is the crypt of St. John, which is believed to be the dining hall of Knights Hospitallers of St. John. From Turkish times remained the mosque and the wall built to guard the city from coastal attacks. The mosque was built by Al-Jazar, and it is considered to be the largest and the most splendid mosque in Israel.
A little town of 10,000 in 1905, is now the third largest city in Israel, with a population of 225,000 inhabitants. It possesses the country's main port and the nation's largest and heaviest industries. It is situated in the most beautiful bay of the Mediterranean coast and at the slope of the most charming mountain in Israel, which is Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel is renowned for being the scene of contest between monotheism and paganism. The prophet Elijah confronted the priests of Baal and confounded them when their incantations failed and his own drew fire from heaven. One of the main features of Haifa is its being the world center of the Baha'i faith. The Baha'is, 2 million, believe in the brotherhood of all men, unity of all religions, and a common language.
Caesarea, a small Phoenician town on the Mediterranean coast, was rebuilt in the year 20 BC by Herod the Great. The finest architects and the most skilled engineers of that time spent 12 years working, and they ended with the construction of one of the most beautiful cities of Palestine and the most striking port cities of that period. After Herod's death, Caesarea, because of its splendors, was chosen to be the seat of the Roman procurator, and it served as capital of the Roman government of Palestine for about 500 years. In the 3rd and 4th centuries, Caesarea was a center of Christian learning. In the 12th century, Caesarea was captured and fortified by the Crusaders. In 1291, the city was destroyed by Bibars. It was then abandoned and gradually buried by the sand dunes.
Caesarea, captured by the Crusaders in 1101, was taken by the Muslims under Saladin, and again it was recaptured by the Crusaders. In 1251, the city was fortified by Louis IX of France, who built the impregnable fortifications around the city. The fortifications, as seen in this slide, comprised a wall which surrounded the city on its 3 landward sides. The wall was protected by a moat of 30 feet wide and a sloping embankment rising 30 to 45 feet above the base of the moat.
It was only in 1956 that archaeologists began excavating Caesarea. Very important remains of the splendors of that city have been unearthed. One of the most interesting remains was the historic discovery of a stone inscribed with the name of Pontius Pilate, the procurator who condemned Jesus to death. This was the first archaeological evidence of the famous Pontius Pilate who lived in Caesarea, and from here he went to Jerusalem to attend the Passover, during which he condemned Jesus to the cross.
The Roman theatre on the seashore south of the Crusader Wall was cleared in 1961. It is in great part restored and used for concerts.
Tel Aviv, or Hill of Spring, founded in 1901 on desolate sand dunes, is now the largest city of Israel with a population of 400,000. It is the first city in the world to be built, populated and administered entirely by Jews. It is the commercial, industrial and cultural center of Israel. Jaffa is immediately south of Tel Aviv and has a population of 60,000. Contrary to Tel Aviv, Jaffa has a recorded history of 3,600 years. Since the very ancient times, it has been an important seaport to the country and the gateway to Jerusalem. At Jaffa, St. Peter raised Tabitha to life. Here, St. Peter had the vision in which God asked him to gather into the bosom of the church also the Gentiles. This program was produced by Sami Awad.